Well, they say anything can happen on any given Sunday, and that was proven true with a lot of upsets happening on Sunday, but most specifically, probably the most notable one was the Tennessee Titans beating the Kansas City Chiefs and really proving that they are a good team, I think. I mean, it's actually kind of hard to tell because they're just so all over the place. They'll beat great teams and lose the not so great teams. Very confusing, but at the end of the day, they definitely had some good performances in this game. A large part of the way they were able to be successful was with Derrick Henry getting 188 yards and 2 touchdowns on just 23 carries, which was 8.2 yards per carry. So there's plenty I could break down, but what I want to break down is going to be Ryan Tannehill and what he did on his final drive, because the final drive was very impressive from Tannehill's perspective. Like, this was the first play, and if you notice what's going on right around here, there are a lot of Kansas City Chiefs players in the area, so they're essentially showing as though they're going to blitz, but we don't know exactly what the blitz is going to be. What is going to actually end up happening is that those two Chiefs will drop back into coverage, and this will actually be zone coverage instead of man coverage. That's what's going to happen on this play. But there's actually going to be one key thing you're going to want to take a look at, and it's actually going to be what's going on right over there. If you notice, Dion Lewis is taking on a defensive lineman right here. That is obviously not an easy thing to pull off whatsoever, to be blocking a defensive end as a halfback. It's clearly a mismatch. However, Lewis is doing a great job on this play. He's getting his block, which is going to allow Tannehill to move up in the pocket and try to see if he can get some things to work. And so Tannehill is then going to turn upfield and actually get past the first down marker, which is even more crazy because if you think about it, this was zone coverage, not man coverage. However, since Kansas City was blitzing, they all had it in their minds that we don't really have to worry about Tannehill too much. Let's just make sure we keep everything in front of us here. They weren't concerned about some short-range passes, but Tannehill was able to realize that and run and pick up a solid gain and get the first down just like that and get the ball into Kansas City Chiefs territory. I found this next play actually even more fascinating, even though this is going to be the one play that doesn't work out for Tennessee, but it still had some positive implications. What Kansas City is going to do once again is play zone coverage, which is a bit of a curious choice because now what Tennessee can do is have their plus receiver on the top half of the screen just run a go route towards the sideline, and him doing this will eventually get open, once he gets past the guy who's covering the flat, but before he gets to the defensive back playing deep, there will be a gap where he will be open. I mean, watch, as you see, it's a little bit further down the field, but once you notice, A.J. Brown right here, he's kind of open. Now, granted, he just wasn't able to make that play, but that definitely scared Kansas City a little bit. Once they saw that play, they said, okay, you know what, we can't be playing zone like this anymore. Let's move over to man coverage. Let's just make sure that we're covering these guys one-on-one. Definitely not a terrible idea. It's probably something I would have done earlier, actually, but the good news for Tennessee is they have a couple of matchups they like in a one-on-one matchup that they feel confident they can win in. Let's be honest, as good of a team as Kansas City is, their biggest weakness is probably their secondary, so this now means that you can potentially get some favorable matchups. Like on this play, what's going to happen is that it's going to be a cover 2 man on this one, and actually Anthony Ferkster's route is going to be that route right there, which is absolutely a route that Tannehill likes. It's a route that Tannehill feels confident he can throw to and potentially gain some yards. Especially with a safety covering Ferkster, it's just a matchup size-wise that Tennessee feels like could potentially work out. And for good reason. As you see, he is going to get the inside leverage and he's going to make the catch inside the 25-yard line. Just a simple case of winning your own one-on-one matchup. And that's really what it comes down to in a situation like this, is who's going to make a play. And in that play, it was Ferkster. That's what you have to do. You have to take advantage of the situations given to you, and that's what Tennessee was doing for the most part. So then Kansas City is going to say, you know what, we're still going to keep with this. Just because it didn't work one time doesn't mean we're going to switch up our game plan. Let's do another cover 2 man. But for Tennessee, they still feel okay with this. And this time they're actually doing something very similar, but instead of having it be a tight end, it's going to be their slot receiver who they paid a bunch of money for in this offseason, and that is Adam Humphries. And for good reason. Watch how towards the end of Humphries' route, if you notice, he's clearly about to get open right here. This is definitely a throw Tannehill should make. And it's going to get even better when Humphries' assigned man ends up falling down. I'm not sure if that would have mattered, but that allows Humphries to really easily get into the end zone for a touchdown. A play like that is the exact reason that the Tennessee Titans went out and got Adam Humphries. That's just a great route ran by Adam Humphries and also a great job of getting into the end zone for a touchdown. The beginning of this season didn't exactly work out exactly as planned for Humphries, but he was able to have a crucial play here, get into the end zone for a touchdown, and if you're a Tennessee Titans fan, that does have to give you a lot of hope, and also a good job by Tannehill of saying, listen, I know that this guy, and he hasn't been bad, but he just hasn't exactly been maybe what you had hoped, but the reality was Tannehill was able to figure out that that's the guy he should hit in that situation, and he made a great throw. Humphries was able to make a good catch, and also just was able to get into the end zone, which is so key there. It also should be mentioned the offensive line did a great job of blocking in front of Tannehill. That is always key in these situations, is just having an offensive line who can block, and that's exactly what happened for Tennessee. Things just worked out very well for them. So that was essentially it. I mean, obviously that was what gave them the eventual lead, but at the same time, the game was far from over. It's now a 1-point game. You ideally would like to get this 2-point conversion here, while making sure, of course, that you don't throw a pick 2, because that would be a catastrophe, because you're only up 1. But you would like to get the 2-point conversion, make it a 3-point game, because even with 23 seconds left, that's not always enough time against Patrick Mahomes. It just isn't. If you had 1 second left and Patrick Mahomes was at his own 1-yard line, you'd still have to sweat a little bit. I mean, that's just the reality of the situation. So for Tennessee, now this is the play they're going to dial up, which I just think is very smart. What they're going to do is it's an RPO, essentially, where what's going to happen is that the first option Tannehill has on this one would be to hand the ball off to Henry right over the middle, and then the second option he would have would be to keep the ball himself and run to the bottom half of the screen, run around his right tackle, and try to get into the end zone himself. Those are his two options. And to decide which option he should choose is going to be entirely dependent on the Kansas City edge rusher right over there. It's all going to be up to whatever he does. If you see right when the ball is snapped, he's getting ready to move up to the top half of the screen and try to make sure that he makes a tackle on Henry. So for Tannehill, he just realizes at this point, okay, since you're running up to try to tackle Henry, I should keep the ball myself so that way I can run around you. That's going to be exactly what he does. He takes a hit, but he doesn't care because he gets into the end zone. They get the 2-point conversion and are now up 3 points against the Kansas City Chiefs. I actually personally love that play call. I think that's just a fantastic play call to have in that situation, because in this 2-point situation where you're trying to just get a 3-point lead, one of the things you do have to focus on is not giving up a pick 2, not fumbling the ball and having it get returned for a touchdown. That is, it shouldn't be your first thought, but it is something you should be a little bit weary of. And I also think that RPOs are just great in short yardage situations, because obviously if the defender stayed too far out to make sure that he's covering Tannehill, well then at least you have an extra blocker. But the chances are is that that just wasn't going to happen, and that Tannehill was going to be able to get into the end zone for a touchdown. I think it can be used really effectively, especially with a guy that maybe you don't necessarily think, oh yeah, that's going to be an RPO type quarterback. I mean, Tannehill is definitely an athletic guy. He's always been an athletic guy, but at the same time, he's always been more known as a pocket passer. He's definitely not a Lamar Jackson out there. So you're able to catch them by surprise. I just think it's a good play call, and I thought that this Tennessee Titans team, what they did in the final minute and a half against the Kansas City Chiefs, it was just all well executed and just really smart, I thought. A team that just beat a very good Minnesota Vikings team without their MVP star quarterback. So that's kind of crazy that the Titans were able to have that drive and take the lead. Mahomes did nearly actually come back and win that game for Kansas City. It absolutely was very close. However, there was the block kick, and if you look at the block kick and you look at the still images, it was actually just perfectly timed. It wasn't a penalty. It kind of looked like it was offsides a little bit, but it actually was just a perfectly timed play. So you got to give Tennessee a lot of credit for that. I mean, huge upset win. And now really, the Titans are in a situation where they could potentially make some noise. I think that the easiest way for them to make the playoffs probably would be through the division. And that's good news for them because right coming up, they have a lot of divisional matchups. They have their bye week next week, and then it'll be the Jacksonville Jaguars, followed by a game against the Colts. And then they still have 2 out of the last 3 games, which are going to be against the Texans. So a lot of divisional matchups coming up, and a lot of very important matchups. Although it would definitely be the most Titans thing ever for them to now have a bye week and then lose to the Jaguars. I mean, this is just such a weird team. It really is just like flip a coin, and if it lands on heads, they win. If it lands on tails, they lose. It seemingly makes no difference who they're playing against, whether or not they'll win. This is a team that's gotten shut out by the Denver Broncos and also put up 35 points and beaten the Kansas City Chiefs. So I think it's fair to say at this point that I'm confused, and I don't really understand what's going on with the Titans. The reality is, they're just a pretty good team, but they're not quite there yet, I think. But again, I don't know. Maybe you guys can help me out. How good are the Tennessee Titans? Because I'm definitely confused. I'm sure you guys are confused. It's just a confusing situation all the way around. But yeah, that's my thoughts on the Tennessee Titans. I hope you